All right. Moving on. Andy, do you want to go next?
Well, I started to segue into AI. I'll share an observation. I'm teaching
Okay.
classes. I teach at Northwestern. I teach master's level students things like content strategy and influencer marketing. Weird, fun, challenging. It's partly for me like presentation camp. I'm doing tens of hours of speaking and polishing messages and slides. But one thing I've noticed after adding AI to my courses, I mean, AI is required. I'm not one of the higher ed people who are afraid of it. I'm one of the higher ed people who worry more that my students won't use it because I want them to be prepared for the economy.
Yep.
And I just had this realization, like, even if you give them access and say, not only can you use it, you're supposed to use it, please use it, people are actually a little bit lazy about how they're using even AI. I think that it requires training. I think lazy prompting is a problem in that people's expectations are strange. They think they're going to put in 8 words and that it will do their whole job for them. That's never going to, there will never be a technology where you type 8 words and your whole job is done. That's not ever going to be a thing. So I think that this is not a deep topic, but it's an observation. And to take it one step further, yes, we all need, prompting is kind of a skill. Practice, it's going to take you tens of hours to learn any skill. And really, Chris, if you agree, I mean, aren't a lot of the AI startups, and they're launching 1,000 a month,
Yep.
partly just about prompt assistant? Like, it's like a layer on top of ChatGPT that like gives you, like, makes you more efficient at using it, because people, even the most simple UX where you just type English, like English is the hot new programming language, even that, we still need help, and startups are adding a layer to help people prompt. Is that what's happening?
Well, like, think about what we've always done, even with like search. Like, for some reason, we never type full sentences into a search bar. Like, you know what I mean? Like, plumber near me. It's like the most,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's like the most caveman way of looking for anything ever. Right?
Yeah, it is. Now that you mention it.
And then you go to AI and you're like, no, you can just talk to it. And they want to be like, caveman near me. You know what I mean? And AI is just like, are you, you know what I mean? What am I going to do with that? I do think they get lazy prompting. And then I also think that when they don't get the first answer, they don't realize it's contextual, because search also was never contextual. Like I have Alexa in our house, right? And I'm using ChatGPT all the time, and I can't stand, I'll come home and I'll just ask it a question, and then I'll ask it a follow-up question, and it forgets the context. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I forgot that you're not contextual. And I know it sounds, when I think of the students that you have, Andy, I really believe that they haven't switched the gear to do that. And I even find my second prompt didn't even need to give as much context to start over again. I just can't help my monkey brain from doing that. You know what I mean?
Well, a simple example and an aha moment for one student from a past class. Enters a prompt and says, "This doesn't feel right. AI is writing super long words." And I say, "Tell it to write shorter words."
Yeah.
Seconds later, she looks up from her laptop and says, "Aha. That's how it works. It's an intelligence.
Right.
Use it like any person. People say it's like an intern. Okay, treat it like an intern. What intern can you give one instruction to and expect to get amazing results? That intern does not exist." So it was.
It's a funny thing, because I think part of the challenge there, and this is a challenge for us all, is that we're bringing sort of our old paradigms to bear here. I mean, Chris, just to your point about the way that we use search, we never sort of got over that, right?
Yeah.
And with prompting, unfortunately, the way that ChatGPT and others, Bard, all of the generative AI sort of technologies have been presented is give it a prompt to create something and it will create it for you. And instead, the answer is actually in the name itself, right? In other words, if you chat with ChatGPT, if you converse with it, it will give you much better results than if you just ask it to create something for you. And I have gotten so much more value out of both Bard and ChatGPT by saying, hey, listen, in a minute, I'm going to give you some stuff, and I want you to think about it, and I want you to give me, some questions that you might ask me to get a better result. And then, and then it says, okay, great. What are you going to? I'm ready for you. Let me here's some questions. And then, okay, I'm going to answer these questions this way. I'm going to answer these questions that way. What do you think about all that? Right. So you're literally you're talking with the technology, not necessarily just saying, create me a Mona Lisa, and expecting it to create you a Mona Lisa. Yep. It's actually working with it like you would a virtual assistant and getting that thing back. And that's just not a paradigm we're used to doing yet.
But it is one step farther. And what I mean by, I want to make sure I say this right. When I have a virtual assistant, I actually, it's kind of funny. You know how I do a bunch of random stuff, Andy? You're like, where do you pick up this stuff? I have an assistant in the Philippines that has my Google Calendar, and I mark the times that I drive, and she will text me and say, hey, do you want me to jump on? And while I drive, we work while I drive, because I'm in the car like 40 hours a week. So it's like a virtual assistant, but only while I'm driving. Anyhow, the way I talk to her is very different than the way that I talk to everybody else. But at no point in time could I go to her and say, by the way, I need you to read everything I've ever written.
Right.
And I, at no point in time, if I say, read all my blogs and then talk like me. You know what I mean? And so one of the things and this is going to kind of come back to your first question, Robert, about how do you build trust? I believe that so much of this is built in what we call AI chat priming. That so many people, as soon as they log on, they're so anxious to get the car moving that they dive right in. What I recommend is that you have a document of the critical things that you say all the time, the idioms, just even the things that you would say, and that you're famous for saying, and you plug that in prior to ever starting. And then what you ask it to do is reference the way you speak, the statistics that you do. It's going to cut down on hallucinations, and it's also going to sound like you and your brand. Now, here's the problem: is that ChatGPT-4 only let you do that at 500 words at a time.
Right.
But yesterday, Claude, so this is just a little AI nerdery here. Microsoft double dipped. So Microsoft invested heavily in OpenAI, and then people left OpenAI and they started Anthropic. And then Microsoft gave, almost $1 billion or more to Anthropic too. Anthropic says they'll be 10 times smarter than GPT-4. So they launched Claude 2 yesterday. It's got higher math scores and it's got higher English scores, and it has 100,000 tokens, which means you could literally upload a Harry Potter book. So right from the jump, if you have Andy's book, you could say, use this as the context of the way I communicate, the way I always use data, the way that I always make strong opinions, and therefore, hopefully, you're going to build trust because it's you're talking consistently the way you've always done. I'm hoping. I don't know, but that's I think in the chat priming is the future of how do you still stay human even though you're using a tool. Because it sounds
interesting. Here's a hot take. If you're talking to someone and they're going to produce anything on your behalf, maybe you have an agency. Status quo is send us your brand guidelines so that we know how to produce content that sounds like you.
Yep.
Right.
So starting really to now, I'd say today, brand guidelines should actually be a series of prompts that the agency can use to teach the AI to produce, to validate or check or maybe produce some simple social post or something in that voice. It's actually weird now suddenly that there's a brand guideline for things like tone and voice, because that absolutely should be something done in generative AI. So, but then how do you collaborate? Do you have like a shared Google, and this is a legit question, do you have just a shared Google Doc where you have like a bunch of training prompts and anyone who wants to produce content in your in that voice goes and has to prime it with 6 prompts before getting or do you just all pay for Jasper? I mean, what's going to happen? Where do we go?
Yeah. Well, I think that your last bit there is a critical piece, because some of the solutions that are out there now, some of the paid solutions, the business oriented, call them enterprise if you like, but they're basically business oriented tools, are doing this, right?
Yep.
Even to the point of, we've been spending a lot of time reviewing the various vendors out there because we help our clients select those kinds of tools. And so the tools that are out there now, and That's just the first one coming to mind. So it's not an endorsement or anything, but Writer is a great example of that, right? Where they give you the tools exactly like what you're talking about to say, here are the prompts to build a brand guideline or a tonal guideline or, a playbook that your custom learning model that you get as part of being a subscriber of this product can help, that will become the guideline. And by the way, you can have multiples, right? You can have, you can have it for different brands, different products, et cetera, and you can use those things to guide you. And another one that we looked at, which I think, just going to your idea of prompts, is they're building tools to help you write better prompts. In other words, they're prompts to help you write prompts. Yeah. In other words, you say, what do you want to do? Just give me an 8-sentence or 8-word sentence of what you want to do. And they'll get, great. Here's the way you might want to prompt it. And they're using AI to help you build better prompts.
Andy and I were just talking about that before the show. Like, I imagine a world where when you used to spell something incorrectly and red lines were under it, like you'd be able to click on it. And it's like,
yeah, exactly.
You could ask it this way, but these are 5 other ways.
I respect that. And I think if you're new to AI, maybe one of your first experiments should be, I am this job title at this kind of company doing this kind of work, and I have these kind of goals. How should I prompt you? Ask AI.
Yeah.
How should I prompt
you?
That's right. To help me be more productive, more efficient, more comprehensive in my content. Tell it your goals, and then ask it what prompts you should consider using.
Exactly.
It's an excellent start.
Yep. Chat with it.
Have you ever seen?
In other words, read it for what it is. Chat with it.
Yeah. Nice to meet you. How can you help me do a better job?
Yep.
Right.
I think one of the most missed opportunities is to also ask it, what are my blind spots? What am I not asking? Because I think because one of the challenges you have is it gives you the right answer. So let's pretend like I snap my fingers and SGE is out, right? And so I type something into Google. I'm getting the chat part is at the top half of the page. Mm-hmm. What I believe one of the benefits of the old way of clicking blue links and searching yourself is they were giving you the answer, but they were also spoon feeding you things possibly, hopefully, that you weren't asking. You know what I mean? And so my only fear is that you're going to have bad prompters, but that the chat was going to give you the answer you want, but you're not going to see the blind spots and you're not going to grow beyond what you can fathom or what you can dream or what you can question.
That's a really important point, Chris. That's a really, really important point because it is 2 different paradigms. Search and working with a generative AI are 2 different, because again, going back to our inability as humans to sort of get this right from the beginning, they should have never been called search engines. They should have been called find engines. And so because what we're really doing is it's displaying content that it has found that sort of begin to contextually match what it thinks we want. And basically it's, we got big into this when the company that I used to be the CMO of, when we were developing our first enterprise web content management system, this is early 2000s, we were, one of the biggest markets was developing site search, right? So site search for companies. And there's a very big difference because what people think of when you think of Google is maximizing return, just to your point, right? So everything that can maximize, but with site search or corporate search or intranet search, you actually want to do the exact opposite. You're trying to minimize what you return because you're trying to get to that exact right answer. So in a very weird way, site search or corporate, internal search is much more like ChatGPT and AI because you just want an answer. You just want the right answer, not necessarily maximizing the search to find all of the things that might match what you're looking for.
Never thought about that. That's interesting. There is a difference in the goals of a site search tool versus a search engine, but at large.
Yeah.
One thing that, but I really like this conversation about the distinction between the paradigm, the use cases, the outputs, the UX for search versus generative AI. I think when people hit that realization and say like, oh, this is good for gap analysis, give it a piece of content and say, what didn't I cover?
Exactly.
What's missing? You copy and paste build a mini AI persona, and then copy and paste it in any of your web pages and say, what important information is missing from this page? It will tell you. A search engine can't do that. Search engines are information retrieval, where this is actually doing things like creating new information, like make me a new recipe for a a Halloween cupcake that didn't exist yesterday. It'll do that. Invent me a new sake cocktail. It'll do that. And didn't gap analysis, right? Like that, like Chris, your point, you can actually ask it. This is another fun prompt. What do people, we'll use you, Robert. What do people hate about selecting options for content advisory services? It'll tell you
Right.
what people don't enjoy about buying your services, and then you know how to address those. So those aren't queries that would give you much in a search engine, because people don't produce content on that, right? There's not a lot of URLs about these topics. But so it's generative AI makes search look like a very narrow use case.
Exactly.